At my brother's wedding, my parents took my champagne, my seat, and then my last name. From this moment, you're no longer our daughter, my mother whispered, smiling for the photographer. They thought I'd crawl away in shame, but I had come to the ballroom with something better than a date. I came with proof. My name is Rowan Calder. I am 29, and I am the ghost at this feast. I arrived alone. The North Shore Regency in Brackenport isn't just a hotel, it's a statement. It's where generations of this city's old money have come to sign treaties, merge dynasties, and celebrate their manufactured victories. Tonight, its grand ballroom was host to my brother's wedding. For me, it was an ambush. The air was overwrought. You could smell the pressurized humidity of 200 bodies dressed in silk and wool, mingling with the sharp green scent of ruptured orchid stems and the yeasty sweetness of endless champagne. Above us, the Regency's famed chandeliers, three colossal, inverted pyramids of Bohemian crystal, did their work. They didn't just light the room, they atomized it. They fractured the scene into 1,000 kinetic, glittering shards, the flash of a diamond earring, the wet curve of a champagne flute, the stark white of the seven-tiered cake, the engineered topography of 200 carefully applied smiles. This was Brackenport society performing its primary function, reinforcing its own exclusivity. I, Rowan Calder, lead risk analyst for Halberd and Knox Capital, stood just inside the arched entryway, a single, misaligned data point in an otherwise perfect projection. My suit was a severe, bespoke charcoal gray. It was armor. It was also a violation of the blush and cream palette mandated by my mother in the wedding invitations. I hadn't brought a date. In my world, the world of forensic accounting and high-stakes corporate audits, you don't bring a civilian to a war zone. I saw them immediately. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Calder, stood near the main floral arch. They were the anchors of the evening, greeting the city's power brokers with practiced ease. My father, in his custom tuxedo, looked every bit the philanthropic titan, the head of the Calder Harbor Light Fund. My mother, Eleanor, was resplendent in a pale gold gown that whispered, rather than shouted, its 5-figure price tag. They were a portrait of civic grace. Then, Eleanor's gaze swept the entrance and found me. Her smile, fixed for a city councilman, did not visibly falter, but I saw it, a fractional narrowing of the eyes, a tightening at the corners of her mouth so subtle. No camera would ever catch it. She leaned into my father's ear, a graceful, intimate gesture. His head turned, his broad, welcoming posture stiffened. They didn't wave, they didn't nod. They simply registered me. A shared, silent verdict passed between them, as swift and cold as a wire transfer. They turned back to their guests. The message, however, had been delivered with perfect clarity. You are an anomaly. You are not welcome here. The reception was already bleeding into its second hour. A string quartet, tucked into a velvet-draped alcove, was sawing its way through a predictable Pachelbel's canon. Across the room, shielded by a phalanx of admiring guests, was the evening's justification. My brother, Bennett. Bennett, the groom, Bennett, the golden. He had always been the light to my shadow. He was charisma. I was calculation. He was the face of the family. I was the fine print. He stood by the towering cake, holding the hand of his new wife, Isabel. Isabel. Her laugh was a bright, practiced trill, designed to charm. She tilted her head just so, allowing the ballroom light to catch the cascade of diamonds at her throat. She was beautiful, polished, and lethally ambitious. As the head of public relations for Kestrel Maritime, she was also the chief architect of the very deal I had flagged as fraudulent. And now, as of a ceremony, I was conspicuously not invited to witness. She was my sister-in-law. Bennett looked utterly besotted, his eyes locked on her, completely oblivious to the familial execution order being prepared at the doorway. He was the Calder heir. I was, apparently, the Calder liability. The cocktail chatter began to subside as guests were gently steered toward their tables. I had managed to secure a glass of seltzer from a passing waiter, having been intercepted by my mother an hour earlier when I'd reached for a flute of Veuve Clicquot. "Not for you, dear," she had murmured, a steel blade wrapped in velvet. "We need to talk, by the terrace doors, alone." Now she found me. She didn't find me so much as she executed a planned maneuver. She cornered me in the alcove by the terrace doors, a space strategically hidden behind a curtain of hanging white orchids, just out of the main sightlines but still humming with the room's ambient noise. "Rowan," her voice was low, stripped of all its social warmth. It was the voice she used with incompetent staff. She didn't waste time. From her small, glittering beaded clutch, she produced a single, crisply folded sheet of heavy bond paper. It wasn't a letter, it was a legal document, a signatory page, already bearing my father's precise signature. "This is an amendment to the Calder Family Trust," she said, her voice a flat, cold whisper. "We are activating Article 4, Section 2B, the reputational damage clause." She held the paper out. "Your access to the fund, your dividends, and your standing as a beneficiary are terminated, effective immediately." I stared at the document. My name, Rowan Elizabeth Calder, was typed in stark black serif. "You smeared your father's company," she stated. It was a fact, not an accusation. "You chose a spreadsheet over your own family. You have embarrassed us on a scale I cannot even begin to calculate." My father materialized at her shoulder, a silent, imposing shadow. His face, usually so jovial for the public, was a mask of granite disappointment, an expression. I realized he must have practiced. "You sabotaged the Harbor Grid project," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Our partners at Kestrel are pulling out because of the concerns you raised. You cost us millions. You cost Bennett his future." My mother's eyes, the same blue as my own, were as cold and flat as Arctic ice. "From this moment," she whispered, leaning in, the scent of her Chanel No. 5 washing over me, "you are no longer our daughter." And then, the truly obscene part, she smiled, a small, tight lift of the lips. I heard the click-click whir of a photographer's autofocus. The event photographer, documenting the room, panned past our alcove. My mother's smile widened, her hand lifting to pat my father's chest, a perfect, loving portrait. The photographer, oblivious, moved on. My father leaned in. "Don't call us any more," he commanded. "You are done here." They turned, in unison, and melted back into the party, leaving me in the shadows of the orchids, holding my own death warrant. The room tilted, an amputation, just like that. My hand wasn't shaking, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. A frantic bird in a cage, reputational damage. The phrase echoed. The blood didn't drain from my face. It was replaced by a sudden, clarifying, glacial rage. It wasn't just an accusation, it was a coup, a meticulously planned frame-up. I hadn't leaked anything. I had warned them. I had done my job. As the lead analyst for Halbert & Knox, the primary capital firm bankrolling the Harbor Grid project, I found the anomalies. I found the web of offshore shell companies Kestrel Maritime was using to inflate the project's valuation by nearly 40%. I found the falsified environmental impact reports and the phantom invoices for dredging work that never happened. I had done what I was paid to do. I presented my findings to my board at Halbert & Knox, recommending we freeze all further investment. And then, as a courtesy, as a daughter, I had gone to my father, privately, and begged him to pull the Calder family's charitable fund from the deal before it imploded and took our name down with it. He had called me paranoid. Bennett had called me jealous. And now, this, someone, and my gaze drifted, icy and precise, across the ballroom to where Isabel, the Kestrel PR chief, was now laughing with my father's biggest business partner, hadn't just ignored my warning. They had used it, They had taken my internal, confidential risk assessment, leaked it themselves to Kestrel's competitors to deliberately scuttle the deal, and then, with surgical precision, pointed the finger straight at me. They needed a scapegoat, a reason for the deal's collapse that wasn't their own greed or Kestrel's fraud. And I, the difficult daughter, the one who loved numbers more than people, was the perfect candidate. I swallowed the anger. It tasted like acid. I folded the document, the paper sharp against my palm. I could feel the peripheral stares of other guests, the whispers starting. "There's Rowan Calder. Did you hear? They thought I would crumble. They expected me to flee the ballroom in shame." I looked up. The official event videographer, a man in a black polo, was repositioning his tripod near the bandstand. His bright LED focus assist light swept the room like a searchlight. He was capturing the laughter, the toasts, the manufactured joy of this perfect family union. My mother raised her champagne glass from the head table, catching my eye from across the room. Her expression was one of absolute, pitiless finality. I did not cry. I did not run. I straightened the lapels of my suit jacket. I composed my face into the neutral, unreadable mask I wear when I'm walking into a hostile boardroom. They thought this was the end of the conversation. They thought they had all the power, all the leverage, but they made two critical errors. First, they hosted their triumph in a corporate event space. The North Shore Regency's ballroom was wired for global presentations, with high-speed fiber, integrated audio, and broadcast-quality projectors. Second, they forgot who I am. I don't just analyze risk. I document threats. I live by a simple creed. Trust, but verify. And if you can't verify, record. My gaze shifted past the glittering chandeliers to the two massive, currently blank white screens that flanked the bandstand. They were dark, waiting patiently for the signal to play the sentimental slideshow of Bennett and Isabel's love story. A file I knew was titled B&I Final V3.mp4. My proof wasn't just in the encrypted drive in my jacket pocket. It was already resident in the building's core AV network. Patched in via a faulty HDMI port I'd tested with the hotel's AV tech an hour before the guests arrived. The audio recordings, the server logs, the metadata proving the real leak came from Isabel's IP address. It was all queued. I had come tonight expecting this confrontation. I had come prepared for a trial. They had just provided the stage and the audience. I took a steadying breath. The entire wedding was about to become my witness. To understand my family, you have to understand the brand. The Calders are not just a family. We are an institution. We are the Calder Harbor Light Fund, the philanthropic heart of Brackenport. Our name is etched onto hospital wings, university libraries, and the glossy donor walls of every art museum in the city. We don't just live, we curate. Our home in Cedar Row, the city's oldest gated community, is less a house than a fortress of cultivated taste. It's a sprawling brick and ivy Georgian monolith, set back from the road by a lawn so perfect it looks like CGI. But the real fortress is the image. My mother, Eleanor, is its chief architect. My childhood wasn't measured in birthdays. It was measured in press releases. Christmas wasn't a holiday. It was the Calder family annual holiday appeal, complete with a photo shoot where we were strategically dressed in complementing shades of cashmere, Bennett in forest green, me in navy, to project humble warmth. Every vacation, every graduation, every public outing was a media script, orchestrated by Mother. She reviewed every photograph before it could be released to our own social circles, checking for bad angles, awkward expressions, or any hint of unmanaged reality. We were, by her design, a family without flaws, a perfect, philanthropic unit dedicated to the betterment of Brackenport. The problem, of course, is that reality is messy, and I was always the messy variable. I am the difficult child, the one who didn't fit the script. I didn't have Bennett's easy charm or my father's political grace. I didn't understand the nuance of social leverage or the point of a 3-hour charity luncheon where no one ate the food. I understood numbers, I understood patterns. I understood that a balance sheet, unlike a press release, cannot lie. Principles and data have a clean, hard-edged logic that I found comforting in a life built on the soft focus lens of my mother's ambition. Bennett, on the other hand, was the light. He was the star. Handsome, effortlessly charismatic, endlessly polite. He was born for the script. He was the son who remembered the names of every donor's spouse, who could deliver a flawless, off-the-cuff speech about community, and who never, ever rocked the boat. He was the perfect heir. It was only natural that he would take a high-level position, project development, at Kestrel Maritime, one of Brackenport's largest industrial players and a key partner in my father's Harbor Light Fund. Kestrel was building the future. Bennett was building Kestrel. It was all part of the perfect narrative. And I, the difficult daughter, was the one who found the rot. I was at my desk at Halbert & Knox. 6 months ago. It was 2:17 a.m. My job is to analyze risk for our capital investments. The Harbor Grid project, a massive cold storage port facility, was Kestrel's flagship endeavor, and Halbert & Knox was its primary financier. My father's fund was a significant secondary investor. It was supposed to be a city-defining triumph. But the numbers didn't add up. The projected costs for specialized offshore dredging were inflated by 60%. The primary contractor for the materials was a shell corporation registered in Panama. That shell was owned by another shell, registered in the Caymans, and the beneficial owner of that shell was a holding company directly linked to Kestrel's own COO. Kestrel wasn't just building a port, they were using our money to build a phantom, pumping up the valuation with fraudulent invoices so they could secure the next, much larger round of funding. They were strip mining their own project, and Halbert & Knox, along with my father's Harbor Light Fund, was underwriting the entire theft. I did my duty. First, to my firm, I presented a 120-page classified report to the Halbert & Knox board. They were horrified. They immediately, and quietly, initiated a freeze on further payments. Then, I did what I thought was my duty as a daughter. I requested a private meeting with my parents, not in the polished, public-facing living room, but in my father's wood-paneled study, the command center. The Harbor Grid project is a fraud, I stated, placing a simplified 10-page brief on his antique mahogany desk. Kestrel is using shell companies to inflate the valuation. You need to pull the Harbor Light Fund's capital now, before this goes public. My father didn't read the brief. He looked at my mother. Eleanor sighed, the sound of profound disappointment. Rowan, must you always be so negative? So cynical? This isn't cynicism, Mother. This is bank fraud. Here are the wire transfers. We have known the executives at Kestrel for 20 years, my father said, his voice laced with the paternal condescension he reserved for me. They are pillars of this community. You're accusing them of being common criminals? I'm not accusing. I'm proving. The data is right there. The data, my mother said, gesturing to my report as if it were something distasteful, is an embarrassment. Bennett is thriving at Kestrel. Isabel is one of their finest people. You're bringing this conspiracy theory, to us. Why? To damage your brother? To make yourself feel important? I was stunned. This has nothing to do with Bennett. This is about protecting the fund. This is about protecting our name. Our name, my father said, standing up, is built on loyalty, on relationships, not on scorched earth audits. You are a pessimistic troublemaker, Rowan. You always have been. You're seeing ghosts where there are none because you don't understand how these things work. You're too rigid. They didn't just dismiss me. They dismissed the facts. They chose the relationship with Kestrel, the public-facing alliance, the shared box at the symphony, the mutual back-scratching, over the cold, hard truth. I was trespassing on the narrative. I was threatening the brand. I left the study that night with a cold pit in my stomach. They had made their choice. 1 week later, I delivered my final, confidential report to the Halbert & Knox Internal Audit Committee. 2 days after that, the world exploded. The rumor started as a whisper in the financial blogs, then bloomed into a full-blown crisis. Halberd and Knox analyst leaks sensitive data. Sabotages Harbor Grid project. My name was everywhere, not as the whistleblower, but as the saboteur. The narrative was brutally effective. Rowan Calder, a disgruntled, difficult analyst, jealous of her brother's success at Kestrel, had allegedly used her position at Halberd and Knox to leak proprietary Kestrel data and falsified analysis to competitors, deliberately scuttling the project out of spite. The evidence was circumstantial, but brilliant in its malice. The leak itself was my own internal risk assessment, stripped of its context and reframed as a hostile attack. But the masterstroke was an email, an anonymous email, sent from an encrypted Proton server, arrived in my mother's inbox. I knew this because she forwarded it to my father, who forwarded it to the board of Halberd and Knox as proof of my instability. The email read, "Eleanor, I can't let this happen. The Kestrel deal is dirty. I'm stopping it. I don't care what father says. I'm sending my analysis to the press. R." It was a fake, but it was a good fake. It used my cadence. It used the correct, terse way I write. And most damningly, the metadata, which I'm sure they hoped no one would check, included a corrupted digital signature fragment. It wasn't my actual signature, but it was algorithmically similar enough to my corporate PGP key to make an HR department panic. It was designed to look exactly like a sloppy, emotional confession from me. Halberd and Knox, facing a PR nightmare and a furious Kestrel, had no choice. They suspended me. Pending a full investigation, my access was cut. My reputation was in ashes. And my family? They went into full crisis PR mode. They publicly aligned themselves with Kestrel, expressing their profound disappointment and shock at my unethical and unstable actions. My father issued a statement reinforcing the HarborLight Fund's unwavering belief in the Harbor Grid project and their partners at Kestrel Maritime. Bennett, my brother, the Light, never called me, not once. And now, I'm standing in the Regency Ballroom, 3 months later, 3 months of silence, 3 months of being an untouchable pariah. I look across the room. Bennett is spinning Isabel on the dance floor, his bride, the head of public relations for Kestrel Maritime. It's all so clear. This isn't just a wedding, it's a merger. It's the final, triumphant sealing of the alliance. My family had a choice: their problematic, truth-telling daughter, or the fraudulent, reputation-saving corporate partnership. They chose the partnership, and to seal the deal, they threw in their son. I watched them, my mother, my father, my brother, and my new sister-in-law, the PR chief who planted the knife in my back. They are laughing, a perfect, beautiful, glittering family, the Calder brand, intact. I clutch the disownment document in my hand. The paper feels thin, insignificant. It's not an execution order, it's a declaration of war. And they've made the fatal mistake of declaring it in a room I've already bugged. The world of Halberd and Knox Capital is not a place, it's a protocol. It operates from a 30-story tower of smoked glass and brushed steel that reflects the cold, gray waters of the Brackenport Harbor. We are a cathedral of capital. Our business is trust, but our currency is data. We run on skepticism. My office, before I was politely asked to vacate it, was on the 28th floor. Risk analysis. My team and I are the digital priests who hear the firm's confessions. We are the anti-fraud division. We don't just look for risk, we hunt it. We analyze the metadata of a partner's balance sheet. We stress test their operational security. We run forensic accounting on their suppliers. My job is to find the lie. I am, by trade, a professional paranoiac. And I was the best. The investigation against me was lethally swift. My suspension was handled by Arthur Vance, my direct superior, a man who values team cohesion above all else. He called me into his glass-walled office, his face a mask of practiced regret. "Rowan," he'd said, unable to meet my eyes. This is unfortunate, extremely unfortunate. On his desk, angled toward me, was a single-sheet IT report. This came from Kestrel's legal department. They're alleging a breach originating from your credentials. The IT report was simple, clean, and devastating. User R. Calder timestamp 143204. EST action. Access LVL7 privilege. Target /server 01 projects WAS. Harbor Grid. Financials. File. H&K. Harbor Grid. Risk assessment. V12. Final. PDF command. Export. Encrypted packet. Destination IP. Redacted proxy mask. Someone, using my account, had accessed the single most sensitive file in the entire Harbor Grid data vault, my own classified fraud analysis, and exported it. This was the leak. This was the smoking gun that proved I had sabotaged the deal. The board has to suspend you, pending a full inquiry, Arthur said, already reaching for his phone, dismissing me. Security will escort you out. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply nodded, my mind already working. 1432 Est. I let the two board security guards walk me to the elevator, my corporate access badge already deactivated. The first rule of risk analysis: verify the timeline. I got home to my sterile, quiet apartment and opened my personal laptop. I have backups, not of the company's data. That would be illegal. I have backups of my life, my calendars, my travel itineraries, my digital receipts. My eyes scanned my calendar for that date. Tuesday, 14th, 1 o'clock p.m. Depart for Logan, BOS. 3 o'clock p.m. Flight AA Form 422, BOS DFW. 6:45 p.m. CST, Land DF, check-in, Hotel Zaza. I pulled the electronic boarding pass from my Apple Wallet. Flight AA 1422. Boarding, 2:20 p.m. East. Departure, 3:00 p.m. East. Status, on time. At 14:32:04, Estant. The exact moment R. Calder was digitally executing the data theft. I was physically at 30,000 feet, in a pressurized metal tube with no functional Wi-Fi, somewhere over Pennsylvania. My alibi was absolute. It was incontrovertible. So, the question wasn't if I was framed. The question was how. A password alone isn't enough to access a Level 7 data vault. My account requires two-factor authentication, my password, and a physical dynamic security token, a small USB key that generates a new 64-character code every 60 seconds. To steal that file, the thief needed my password, and they needed physical access to my token, or at least a cloned copy of its credentials. My mind raced backward. When had I last been in the same room as the Kestrel team? The memory surfaced, cold and sharp, a synergy meeting, 3 weeks before the leak. It was held in one of our largest glass-walled boardrooms at Halbert and Knox. My father was there, representing the Harbor Light Fund. Bennett was there, smiling his $1,000,000 smile. And Isabel was there, running the presentation. She was brilliant, I'll give her that. Polished, witty, and completely in command, clicking through slides about community partnership and sustainable futures. Then, the glitch. The projector system, which connects to our secure internal server, suddenly froze on a slide. Isabel tapped at her laptop. Oh, blast, she'd laughed. A charming, self-deprecating sound. It seems my guest pass isn't syncing with your server to pull the video file. It's a protocol mismatch. I think, Rowan, she said, turning those bright, empathetic eyes on me. You're the wizard with this stuff, right? Can I possibly just borrow your token for a second? Just to get the system to recognize the file path. It's for the Harbor Grid folder. It was a breach of protocol, a major one. But I was in a room with my father and brother, both of whom were already looking at me with that familiar, Don't be difficult Rowan expression. Trapped by the social script. I pulled the small USB key from my keyring. 90 seconds, I said. You're a lifesaver, she replied. She walked to the conference room's built-in terminal, my token in her hand. She was turned away from the table. My father started asking me about my DC trip, a perfect planned distraction. She was at that terminal for at least 2 minutes, long enough to run a simple script, long enough to clone the token's root certificate. She returned, handing me the token with a grateful smile. All fixed. The video's queued up. She hadn't fixed a bug. She had installed a backdoor. She had created a digital ghost of my identity. But I still needed to prove it. I was suspended, locked out of H&K's servers, but they were sloppy. I went back to the Halbert and Knox Tower, not as an employee, but as a guest. My badge was dead, but my face was not. I told the lobby security I was meeting Arthur for lunch. They signed me in. I didn't go to the 28th floor. I went to the 12th. Physical security. Mike, I said to the day shift supervisor, a man I'd helped redesign his department's data loss prevention protocols. I have a delicate problem. I'm working an internal audit, and I need to check some elevator footage from 3 weeks ago, the day of the Kestrel Synergy meeting. He typed. He frowned. That's weird. What's weird? The footage from that entire camera block, elevator bank C, 12 and 12 to 1700, it's gone. Gone? How? Says here, he tapped the screen. Corrupted file? Flagged for deletion during routine maintenance. Routine maintenance, the corporate euphemism for a deliberate wipe. Someone with high-level administrative access had cleaned up after Isabel. My blood ran cold. This was deeper than just Isabel. Kestrel couldn't authorize a data wipe inside my building. Who could? I thanked Mike and left. I needed another piece. If Isabel was the how, who was the why? I thought about the Synergy meeting, my father, Bennett, Isabel, and I checked the visitor log I'd just signed. The public-facing lobby terminal. I scrolled back. Date, Tuesday, 14th. Guest, Isabel Vance. Host, Arthur Vance. Guest, Robert Calder. Host, Arthur Vance. Guest, Bennett Calder. Host, Arthur Vance. And then, one I hadn't registered. Guest, Eleanor Calder. Host, Isabel Vance. My mother, she wasn't in the meeting. She had arrived, according to this log, 20 minutes before the meeting and gone up to the Kestrel temporary office suite on the 19th floor, with Isabel. And that's when it all connected. The entire conspiracy snapped into place with the cold, satisfying click of a high-security lock. This wasn't just Isabel trying to save her company. This was a joint operation. I find the fraud. I warn my family. My family, father and mother, decide I am the liability, not the fraud. I am the threat to the Kestrel Calder brand, to Bennett's career, to the Harborlight Fund's reputation. They collude with Isabel, the Kestrel PR chief, who is perfectly positioned to execute the counter-move. My mother arrives at H&K Tower for a pre-meeting with Isabel to coordinate the plan. Isabel borrows my token during the meeting, creating the digital weapon. They wait. They wait until I am on an airplane. My alibi secure, but, more importantly, my person completely offline and unreachable. From an IP address masked by a Kestrel proxy, Isabel, or her tech, uses the cloned credentials to execute the leak. They simultaneously send the faked confession email to my mother, who acts her part perfectly, playing the horrified parent. Kestrel files the complaint. My firm, facing a PR crisis and pressure from my own father, suspends me. I am neutralized. The fraud is buried. The alliance is sealed. And the disloyal daughter is purged. It was a brilliant plan. Clean, corporate, vicious. But they forgot who I am. They locked me out of the front door. They didn't know about the back one. As a lead analyst, I have admin-level access to the firm's encrypted, off-site disaster recovery servers, the ones that keep immutable, time-locked backups of everything, the ones that can't be wiped for maintenance. That night, from a burner laptop using a Tor browser, I didn't just log in, I went digital archaeological. I downloaded everything. The complete, uncorrupted server logs, showing the true origin IP of the leak, an IP that resolved directly to a Kestrel Maritime corporate VPN. The deleted elevator footage, which was, of course, just archived. I watched the 4-second clip of Isabel, at my desk, slipping a small, silver USB device into her pocket after plugging in my token, a cloner. The internal chat logs from Kestrel's server, which I'd gained access to during my initial fraud investigation between Isabel and my mother, discussing handling the Rowan situation. I compiled it all, every log, every video file, every email. I compressed it, wrapped it in multiple layers of AES-256 encryption, and transferred it to a single, matte black SSD. The drive is biometric, keyed only to my fingerprint. That drive is now in the inner breast pocket of my suit jacket, resting lightly against my ribs. When the embossed, cream-colored wedding invitation arrived at my apartment a week ago, I didn't see it as the insult they intended. I didn't see it as their final victory lap. I saw it as the venue. They had done me the courtesy of gathering every single player, my parents, my brother, the Kestrel leadership, and every major stakeholder in Brackenport, into one room. This isn't a wedding, it's a deposition, and they've provided the stage. My suspension was delivered via a cold, HR department formatted email, 3 weeks, unpaid, pending the results of a formal investigation. My pay was frozen. My corporate presence was scrubbed from the internal directory. I was, in a single keystroke, unpersoned. Halberd and Knox, to their credit, forwarded me the evidence package Kestrel had submitted. It was an act of procedural fairness, but really, it was them washing their hands. "Here is the case against you," it silently screamed. "Please find a way to make this go away." I sat in my apartment for 3 days, the silence of my non-existent phone deafening. I didn't panic. I analyzed. I opened the package. It was a masterpiece of digital assassination. First, the email. The one sent to my mother. It was brilliant. They hadn't tried to sound like a corporate drone. They had tried to sound like me. I've always been accused of being abrupt. My emails are functional, not friendly. "Eleanor, I can't let this happen. The Kestrel deal is dirty. I'm stopping it. I don't care what Father says. I'm sending my analysis to the press." It was my cadence, the short, declarative sentences, the deliberate avoidance of contractions, the way I break my lines for emphasis, the final, curt initial, the use of a simple period after stopping it, where anyone else would have used an exclamation mark. They had studied me. This wasn't an email. It was a forgery of my personality. But the forger was sloppy. Attached to Kestrel's complaint was a draft of the leak, a Word document version of my analysis, supposedly found on an open server. The file was meant to be the draft I was preparing for the press. I opened the file. I went to Properties. I clicked Details. And there it was. The digital fingerprint. Last modified, I. Vance. Computer, KST MKT LT04. Isabel's corporate laptop ID. They had tried to scrub the metadata, but they missed the document's internal revision history. A rookie mistake, but they had a better one. The content created timestamp was 14/28/02. Assessed. But the last modified timestamp, the one tied to Ivance, was 11/28/59 PST. Pacific Standard Time. I checked Isabel's public calendar, her Instagram, the Kestrel press releases. On that day, at that exact time, she was in San Francisco, delivering the keynote speech at the Women in Maritime Leadership Conference. She must have finalized the evidence from her hotel room just before going on stage. Next, the server logs, the irrefutable proof of the hack from Kestrel Calder, the IP address, as Kestrel presented it, was masked by a proxy. But I ran my own trace. The IP block wasn't just some random proxy. It was a commercial 24 block registered to the North Star Hospitality Group, Specifically, it was a static IP assigned to the guest business center of the Regency Grand Harborwin, the very hotel in San Francisco where Isabel was hosting her conference. She didn't even bother to use a proper VPN. She just walked down to the business center, plugged in a USB, and ruined my life. She had my clone token, but she still needed my password. A level 7 data vault requires both. How? My blood chilled. I remembered. 3 weeks before the leak, a family brunch I'd been guilted into. After, I'd swung by the Kestrel Tower to give Bennett a file. I parked in the subterranean garage, P4. As I got out of the car, my phone died. Not a battery dead, but dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi. A complete blackout. I'd assumed it was just a dead zone. I was down there for maybe 10 minutes. I pulled my own H&K admin logs. I searched for my user ID, R. Calder. Timestamp, 11:04:30. Est, event, password recovery query, initiated. Timestamp, 11:04:45. Est. Event, 2FA-SMS sent. Timestamp, 11:05:12. Est. Event, 2FA SMS failover. Timeout. Timestamp, 11:05:15. Event, password recovery query, aborted. They hadn't succeeded, but they had tried. They had used an SS-7 intercept or a Stingray, a cell site simulator, in the garage to capture my incoming texts. They had initiated a password recovery, planning to steal the 2FA code sent to my phone. It failed, but it told me everything. They were actively trying to break my account. The token cloning was just one part of a multi-pronged attack. They must have gotten my password another way. A keylogger. A phishing attempt I'd missed. It didn't matter. They had the keys. They had the motive. They had the IP address. And then, the social campaign began. The shock and disappointment from my family was the final layer of lacquer on the frame. I heard it from my one remaining friend at the fund. My mother, at a fundraiser luncheon, confiding in two of the city's biggest donors. Her voice, a performance of heartbroken tragedy. We just don't know what to do about Rowan. She's become so negative. Isabel, bless her, has been a rock. She literally saved Robert's project and our family's reputation from Rowan's instability. Then came the call from my father. Not a shout, worse, a sigh, the sound of paternal burden. Rowan, he'd said, his voice heavy. I'm telling you this as your father. Let this go. Kestrel is filing a formal complaint. Don't fight it. It was a frame-up. Dad, I have proof. Proof? He scoffed. Or just more data? You're starting to sound hysterical. You need to accept that you were wrong. You're making this family look ridiculous. You look like you're jealous of your new sister-in-law. It's an ugly look. Rowan, drop it. He hung up. Don't fight the family. You look jealous. It was the masterstroke. They hadn't just framed me for a crime. They had framed me for a motive. A petty, feminine, emotional motive. I wasn't an analyst who found fraud. I was a jealous, negative woman. The next day, Kestrel Maritime's official complaint landed on the desk of the CEO of Halbert & Knox. It was a 15-page legal threat, co-signed by their corporate counsel and my father's general counsel from the Harbor Light Fund. It demanded my immediate termination, financial restitution, and a public apology for malicious corporate espionage. This was the package that led to my 3-week suspension. My salary was cut. My access was gone. I was isolated. They had put me in a box, nailed the lid shut, and were now holding a party on top of it. But they forgot one thing about putting a risk analyst in a box. We don't panic. We use the quiet. We find the one, single structural flaw. My invitation to the wedding arrived on the 3rd day of my suspension. A thick, cream-colored card, embossed with the intertwined initials B and I. It was an act of supreme, arrogant cruelty. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons to witness their victory. I RSVP'd yes. Then I got to work. The invitation listed the wedding planners, Regency Events, and the AV vendor, Brackenport Premier Productions. I spent a day building a fake email account, Sarah Levitt, events@gmail.com. I created a simple, elegant signature, Sarah Levitt, Day of Coordinator, friend of the Calder family. I emailed the project manager at Brackenport Premier Productions. Subject: Urgent Edition. Bennett and Isabel Calder Wedding, Regency Ballroom. Hi, Mark. So sorry for the last-minute change. The mother of the groom, Eleanor, has requested a small, surprise addition to the main reception slideshow, B&I Final E3.mp4. I believe you have it. It's just a single slide, a small video file to be inserted right after the growing up section. I have the file here, but more importantly, I need to ensure the timing is perfect. Can you send me the final slideshow file? I'll embed it myself with the correct transitions and send it right back. Just want to make sure Eleanor's surprise lands perfectly. She's a stickler for details. Thanks, Sarah. I knew my mother. The idea of her being a stickler for details was so infamously true that no vendor would question it. 20 minutes later, Mark replied, Hi, Sarah. Of course. Anything for Mrs. Calder. That's no problem at all. File attached. Send it back when you're ready. Mark. I downloaded the 4GB file. B&I Final V3.mp4. I didn't add a video. I didn't change a single photo. I just opened the presentation's container file. I embedded a command, a simple, elegant macro, hidden in the file's code. The slideshow would run perfectly. The photos of Bennett as a child, the photos of Isabel's triumphant equestrian days, the curated, perfect images of their love story. It would all play. But the file was now a trap. The video player at the Regency would be controlled by a simple wireless remote, a clicker. The forward button would advance the slides. The back button would go back. But I had remapped the back button. If the operator pressed back at any time, the macro would execute. It wouldn't just go to the previous slide. It would instantly terminate the B&I Final V3.mp4 file path and reroute the projector's HDMI input. It would reroute it to Input 2. Input 2, where my personal laptop, loaded with my encrypted SSD, my server logs, my audio files, and the deleted elevator footage, would be plugged in, live, and waiting. I sent the updated file back to Mark. All set. Thanks so much. I looked at the disownment paper in my hand. I looked at my mother, smiling for the cameras. They were all so proud of their perfect frame. They'd built a cage of lies to hold me. They never realized I was the one who held the key. My suspension was a gift. It gave me silence. It gave me time. The first 72 hours, I did not sleep. I analyzed. They had framed me inside my own company. They assumed that by cutting my access, they had blinded me. But my job isn't just about accessing my network. It's about understanding theirs. I focused on Kestrel. How do you get data from the company that just publicly accused you of data theft? You don't ask as Rowan Calder. You ask as someone they are legally forbidden from refusing. Halbert and Knox, my employer, has a massive joint fund with a Frankfurt-based investment bank. This bank, and all its subsidiaries, are governed by the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. It is the single most powerful data privacy law on Earth, and it carries a right of access. I used my one remaining, deeply buried contact at H&K, a terrified junior analyst in the compliance department, a kid I'd saved from termination 6 months prior, to make a call. I didn't ask him to steal anything. I asked him to do his job. You need to flag an urgent GDPR compliance audit via the Frankfurt office. I told him over a secured line. The request is simple. As part of our joint venture, Kestrel Maritime is a data processor for H&K. We require, under Article 15, all access and processing logs related to H&K data, specifically Project Harbor Grid, from their public relations department's network router for the last 90 days. It was a brilliant, ironclad legal maneuver. Kestrel's lawyers had two choices: comply or be an immediate, multi-million-dollar breach of their partnership agreement with our EU partners. They complied. 2 days later, the junior analyst forwarded me the encrypted data packet. It was a terabyte of raw, unfiltered router logs from Kestrel's PR department. It was a digital haystack. I spent 48 hours sifting, cross-referencing, and filtering. And then, I found the needles. The logs showed Isabel's corporate laptop, KST MKT LT04, accessing the H&K data vault, but not just once, it was twice. The first entry? 3 weeks prior, the exact day and time of our synergy meeting. The log showed her machine authenticating using my cloned token credentials for exactly 124 seconds, the 2 minutes she was at the boardroom terminal. Fixing the glitch, she was testing the key. The second entry? The day of the leak, 14/32/04. Est. The authentication packet was routed from the IP address in San Francisco, just as I'd traced, but the Kestrel router log showed the origin of the command. Before it hit the hotel proxy, the command was initiated by a user logged into Kestrel's internal network as admin Isabel Vance. She had used her own admin account to launch the hack, using my cloned credentials as the weapon. This was the digital chain of custody, complete and unbroken, leading from her keyboard to my ruined career. But I needed more than logs. I needed visuals. I went back to the deleted elevator footage from the H&K archives. The quality was grainy, shot from a high-angle security bubble, but as Isabel turned from my desk after borrowing the cloner, she swiped her guest pass to exit our secure floor. The pass was on a lanyard, and as she turned, the reflective silver strip on the plastic badge momentarily caught the overhead fluorescent light. And in that flash of reflection, for 3 frames, you could see her face. She was wearing gloves. Thin, black, nondescript gloves inside a climate-controlled, 72-degree office. She was avoiding leaving fingerprints on the USB token cloner she just pocketed. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was premeditated. Next, the fake evidence, the Word document she'd drafted to look like my leak. I analyzed the metadata. Last modified. Vance. A rookie mistake, but I dug deeper. The document contained embedded screenshots of my analysis. I pulled the EXIF data from those image files. Camera model, Canon EOS R5, serial number 883014002917. I then went to Bennett and Isabel's public wedding website, the Our Story page. It was full of professionally shot pre-wedding photos, the two of them laughing in a vineyard, walking on a beach. I downloaded one. I stripped the metadata. Camera model, Canon EOS R5, serial number 883014002917. She used her own high-end personal camera to take photographs of her computer screen to create the faked screenshots. She didn't even know how to take a clean digital screenshot, or she was too arrogant to think anyone would ever check. This was the how. Now, I needed to lock in the who, the conspiracy. I went back to the Kestrel visitor logs. The day my token was cloned, my mother, Eleanor Calder, arrival, 10:15 a.m., host, Isabel Vance, reason for visit, deliver thank you gift. A thank you gift? An hour before the critical synergy meeting? A gift for what? For agreeing to frame her daughter? The final piece of evidence came not from a server, but from my own phone. I am a risk analyst. After my family dismissed my fraud warning, I classified them as a hostile entity. All communications from Calder contacts are, by default, recorded and transcribed. It's a protocol I developed for hostile corporate negotiations. My mother called me 2 nights ago, not to apologize, not to beg me to reconsider, to confirm my attendance. Rowan, darling, her voice, a performance of strained maternal concern. I am glad you're coming. It shows maturity, that you're willing to put this unpleasantness behind us for your brother's day. I'll be there, Mother, I said. my voice flat. Good, good. Well, I'll see you then. She hung up, or she thought she did. She must have been on her car's Bluetooth and fumbled the disconnect button. I stayed silent, the line open. I heard her exhale, a sound of profound frustration, and then her voice, no longer performing, but sharp and cold. She's coming. I can't believe she's actually coming. The audacity. Then, a second voice, clear as a bell, from the passenger seat. Isabel. It's perfect. Eleanor, Isabel said, her tone businesslike. It's exactly what we wanted. She shows up. She looks pathetic. Bennett sees she's making an effort. It legitimizes our narrative that she's the unstable one. And Robert? My mother asked. He'll handle the disownment paper the moment she arrives. Quietly, by the terrace, Isabel replied. Her voice was pure steel. She gets the message. We get the moral high ground. Tonight, we cut her from the family for good. We have to. The Kestrel board needs to see a united front before the merger vote next week. A merger vote. It all snapped into focus. This wasn't just about burying fraud. This was about a merger. Kestrel was acquiring a smaller logistics firm, and the Calder Harbor Light Fund was the guarantor. My fraud report would have killed the deal. They weren't just saving a project. They were sacrificing me to ensure a multi-billion-dollar acquisition closed. Click, the call finally disconnected. I sat in the dark. The audio file. Mother Isabel Final. MP3. Playing on a loop. I had my case. The router logs, the gloved reflection, the camera metadata, the visitor log, and now, the audio confession. I compiled everything into a single, encrypted presentation file. I sent it to exactly one person, Marcia Trent, the general counsel of Halbert and Knox. She is not my friend, but she is a lawyer who hates, more than anything, being lied to. Her reply came at 3:00 a.m. Subject: for your eyes only. Message: I have reviewed the attached. This is not just an internal H&K matter. This is actionable corporate espionage and wire fraud. Do not speak to anyone. Do not, under any circumstances, release this. Halbert and Knox will take the lead. We are scheduling an emergency board meeting and contacting the SEC. We will take the lead. That's what I was afraid of. Marcia would do her job. She would protect the firm. She would use my evidence as leverage to force a quiet, massive settlement from Kestrel. Isabel would be fired. My suspension would be lifted with a confidential apology. My name would be cleared in a memo no one would ever see. But my family, my mother, my father, would walk away unscathed. The world would still see Rowan Calder as the difficult daughter who was handled. The reputational damage was public. The remedy had to be public. Marcia wanted to take the lead. Fine, I just needed to move the starting line. I arrived at the North Shore Regency Grand Ballroom an hour before the guests. I was dressed for a boardroom battle, not a wedding. I found the AV tech, a harried-looking guy named Mark, setting up his booth. Hi, I smiled, flashing my H&K badge. Rowan Calder. I'm with the Harbor Grid Project, a Kestrel partner. We're a sponsor. I have a 2-minute congratulations reel our CEO recorded. Isabel's office must have forgotten to send it. Can I please patch into the system? I just need an HDMI port. He saw the badge, the suit, the confidence. He saw a fellow professional, not the family pariah. Ma'am, all my inputs are full, he said, pointing to the switcher. I've got the DJ, the house feed, and the main slideshow laptop on input 1. What about input 2? I pointed to the empty, glowing port on the big LED wall controller. That's just a backup feed. It's not patched to the remote. Perfect. I pulled out my slim silver laptop and an HDMI cable. I'll just plug this in. I'll cue it myself. When the MC, calls for the H&K toast, just hit the button for input 2. Then back to input 1 when I'm done. I don't know. My run sheet is locked. I palmed him a crisp $100 bill. For the trouble, you'll make me a hero with my boss. He looked at the money. He looked at the port. 2 minutes. You promise? 2 minutes, I said. He plugged me in. My laptop screen mirrored to the main system. Waiting. I minimized my presentation and set my desktop background to a solid, innocuous black. He thought he was in control. He thought he was waiting for a cue. He didn't know that my real trap was the macro I'd already embedded in the main slideshow file, the one running on his laptop, on input 1, the file I'd infected days ago. My plan didn't require him to switch inputs. My plan just required the MC, or the DJ, or the wedding planner, to do one simple thing: accidentally hit the back button. The small wireless clicker sat on the main lectern. Ready. The forward button would advance the slides of Bennett and Isabel's perfect life, but the back button, the one someone would inevitably press if they skipped a slide, that button now belonged to me. I stood in the corner of the ballroom, the disownment paper folded in my pocket, right next to the biometric SSD. I had redundancy, a manual trigger, input 2, and an automatic one, the macro. This is risk analysis. You always have a contingency. The toasts were the main act of the performance. This was the moment the merger, both corporate and familial, was ratified in public. My father stood. Robert Calder. He commanded the room without raising his voice. The jazz combo fell silent. A warm amber spotlight found him at the head table, the one marked family. He picked up his champagne flute, the crystal catching the light. "To Bennett," he began, his voice amplified by the room's expensive sound system, a voice of pure, practiced sincerity. "My son, a man I am proud to call my heir." He placed his hand on Bennett's shoulder, a gesture of dynastic transfer. "And to Isabel," he said, turning his smile, his donor relations smile, on her, "who has not just joined our family, but has illuminated it. She has brought a strength and a wisdom that, frankly, we were lacking." The subtext was as clear as the crystal. Isabel is the daughter we always wanted, not the one we got. My mother, Eleanor, beamed beside him. She reached out and, with a gesture of infinite tenderness, brushed a non-existent stray hair from Isabel's face. It was a perfect tableau. The photographer's flash gun popped, capturing the lie for the society pages. My father raised his glass higher. To a future built on loyalty, on trust, and on unbreakable family bonds, to Bennett and Isabel. "To Bennett and Isabel," the room echoed. 200 glasses were raised. I watched my father, his eyes, full of paternal pride, scanned the room, acknowledging the applause. His gaze swept past the AV booth, past the shadow where I stood. It did not pause. It did not register. It did not even have the decency to be cold. It was simply vacant. I was not a person to be snubbed. I was an object, like a chair or a floral arrangement, irrelevant to his field of vision. He was the one who taught me about balance sheets. He taught me that every entry must be accounted for, that a number cannot be both a debit and a credit. And yet, he looked at me and saw nothing. I was a rounding error he had already decided to delete. He sat down to a roar of applause. Bennett, my brother, looked flushed, emotional, and utterly blind. He kissed Isabel. My mother delicately kissed Isabel's cheek, a gesture more intimate than any she had ever shown me. "My daughter," she mouthed. The MC, a man with a dazzling white smile and a voice like a game show host, bounded back to the lectern. "Thank you, Robert, for those beautiful words. And now, folks, the moment we've all been waiting for. Bennett and Isabel have shared so much with us. Now, they want to share their incredible journey of love." This was the signal. The house lights dimmed. The crystal chandeliers faded from a brilliant white to a deep, cinematic blue. The candles on the 200 tables suddenly became the primary source of light, flickering like fireflies in the manufactured twilight. The room fell into a reverent hush. And then, the two massive LED screens, flanking the bandstand, came to life. B&I Final V3 MP4. The music began, a gentle, acoustic guitar. The first image faded in. A windswept beach. Bennett and Isabel in profile, silhouetted against a perfect blazing orange sunset. It was a stock photo, but it was their stock photo. I stood by the AV booth, invisible in the darkness. My position was perfect. I was just another shadow. Mark, the tech, was focused on his laptop, his face lit by the glow, ensuring the file played smoothly. He was a professional, concentrating on his task. He didn't see me. He didn't see the small, black plastic presenter's remote I held in my right hand, down at my side. My thumb rested on the forward button. This was my manual override, my contingency. This remote was paired via Bluetooth to my laptop, the one currently plugged into HDMI 2, its screen dark, its processor waiting. The macro I'd planted in the slideshow file was my trap. This remote was my trigger. The slideshow continued. It was a masterpiece of public relations, a masterclass in narrative construction, and I had no doubt Isabel had personally supervised every frame. A photo of Bennett as a child, in a tiny sailor suit, perfect. A photo of Isabel winning an equestrian trophy, perfect. A photo of them on a ski lift, bundled in expensive gear, laughing with perfect teeth. A photo of them at a Harbor Light Fund gala. Bennett in his tux. Isabel in a stunning emerald gown, shaking hands with the mayor. This, the slide implied, was not just a couple. This was a partnership. I watched the head table. The glow from the screens illuminated their faces. Bennett was rapt, his arm tight around his new wife, genuinely moved by the spectacle of his own life. Isabel was performing. She watched the screen, her eyes wide, as a particularly sentimental photo of Bennett appeared. Her hand went to her stomach, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, a hint, a suggestion of emotion so profound it was physical. She leaned her head onto Bennett's shoulder. He, of course, responded, kissing the top of her head. It was flawless. My mother, Eleanor, was also performing. She took a linen cocktail napkin and pressed it, just once, to the corner of her right eye, a single, graceful tear for the beauty of it all. She was the proud matriarch, her legacy secured, her problematic variable, me, erased. I watched them. The room was silent, save for the swelling, saccharine soundtrack. I looked away from the screen, at the audience, the Kestrel executives at table 2, watching with proprietary smiles, the H&K board members at table 4 looking slightly uncomfortable but obligated to be there, the city's donors, lapping up the performance. This was my jury. My heart was not racing. It was the opposite. I felt a sudden, profound calm. The air in the room felt thick and slow. I could hear the click of the server fan inside Mark's laptop. I could hear the distant, muffled clink of a glass from the bar. My heartbeat was a flat line, steady, rhythmic. It was the sound of the trading room at 4:00 a.m., the digital metronome of the servers processing overnight trades. It was the sound of inevitability. The emotional swell of the slideshow was reaching its climax. The photos of their engagement party, the photo of them signing the deed to their new house in Cedar Row, not 2 blocks from our parents. The music faded, replaced by a more somber, dramatic piano chord. The images stopped. The screen faded to the same deep blue as the room. White text began to fade in. Simple, elegant. A love tested. The piano chord resolved. Another line of text faded in below. A bond forged in fire. I held my breath. Here it comes. The arrogance. The need to not just win, but to rub it in. A new slide appeared. A photo of them. Not smiling, but looking strong. Holding hands. Staring resolute-faced into the middle distance, like the poster for a political campaign. The music swelled. Full orchestra now. And then, the final line of text faded in at the bottom of the screen. To the person who tried to ruin us. My thumb tensed on the button. We forgive you. The audacity of it. The sheer, breathtaking, theatrical hypocrisy. They weren't just disowning me. They weren't just framing me. They were forgiving me, in public, for a crime I didn't commit. They were painting themselves as the victims, the benevolent survivors, and me as the pathetic, unnamed villain. My father, at the head table, nodded slowly, gravely, at the screen. My mother clutched Isabel's hand. This was the cue. This was the moment they had scripted for their own glory, but it was the trigger for mine. My thumb, resting on the small black plastic button in my pocket, pressed down. It made no sound, just a quiet, physical click, a confirmation of contact. A single, invisible infrared beam shot from my hand to the receiver I'd hidden in my laptop bag by the booth. A single command was executed. HDMI input switch 1, 2. The slideshow, The Lie, had reached its final frame. It was my turn to play. The screen hung on, "We forgive you." The orchestral music swelled to a crescendo, a final, virtuous chord. The room was suspended in that moment of perfect, manufactured grace. My mother, Eleanor, dabbed her eye. My father nodded. The benevolent patriarch. Then, from the ballroom's speakers, came a sound that did not belong, a hard digital click. The screens, on both sides of the room, cut to absolute black. The orchestra vanished, sliced off mid-note. The house lights, dimmed for the show, remained dark. 200 guests were plunged into a sudden, expectant silence, their faces lit only by the flickering table candles. For 1 second, there was nothing, just the darkness. Then, a single, pure white audio waveform appeared in the center of the void, pulsing with the rhythm of recorded speech. My mother's voice filled the room. It was not her warm, public-facing, philanthropic voice. It was the one I knew, the one that was cold, sharp, and impatient. "She's coming," the recording of her voice echoed, clean and clear. "I can't believe she's actually coming. The audacity." A collective gasp from the tables near the back. I saw my father's head, at the main table, snap toward the screen, his smile frozen, confusion warring with a sudden, dawning horror. Then the second voice, Isabel's, crisp, professional, and utterly ruthless. "It's perfect, Eleanor. It's exactly what we wanted. She shows up. She looks pathetic. Bennett sees she's making an effort. It legitimizes our narrative that she's the unstable one. And Robert," my mother's voice again, "he'll handle the disownment paper the moment she arrives, quietly, by the terrace," Isabel replied. The sound of her voice, so calm, so strategic, was a physical blow. "She gets the message. We get the moral high ground. Tonight, we cut her from the family for good. We have to. The Kestrel board needs to see a united front before the merger vote next week." A merger vote. The word hung in the air, naked and ugly. The audio file, Mother Isabel Final, MP3, hung on the black screen for a moment after the sound faded, and then it was gone. The black was replaced by a split screen. On the left, server log, H&K Data Vault, server 01. Event, LVL 7 export, H&K Harbor Grid, risk assessment V12, final. User, R. Calder. Cloned token ID 77s. Or B. Timestamp 1432-4 est source IP 131-2278-110 Regency Grand Harbor Win SF. On the right, the grainy, high-angle security footage from the H&K 28th floor elevator bank. The timestamp in the corner read 12:51 IST, the day of the Synergy meeting. The video played in slow motion. It showed Isabel, her back to the camera, at my desk terminal, her hand moving. It showed her pocketing the small, silver USB cloner. Then, she turned to swipe her guest pass to exit the secure zone. The video froze. A red circle, sharp and analytical, appeared. It zoomed in, the pixels blowing up, focusing on her hand as it swiped the pass. She was wearing thin, black gloves. A new line of text, in stark white, appeared at the bottom of the screen. Why wear gloves in a 72-degree office? The room was utterly still. I could hear someone at a nearby table whisper, "My God." The screen changed. A new graphic, a network heat map. It showed the digital path of the crime. A glowing red line started at a box labeled KST MKT LT04. Admin Isabel Vance. It connected to the hotel IP 1317810. It connected to the H&K data vault. It ended at a box labeled Leaked File PDF. The red line pulsed. A heartbeat of data. The screen changed again. It showed the faked Word document Kestrel had sent to my firm. The Properties window was open. The metadata highlighted in a red box. Last modified by I. Vance. Then, the EXIF data from the falsified screenshots embedded within it. Camera model, Canon EOS R5. Serial number, 88301140002917. Beside it, a new image faded in. A glossy, professional pre-wedding photo of Bennett and Isabel, laughing in a vineyard. The metadata from that photo was pulled and highlighted. Camera model, Canon EOS R5. Serial number, 883011402917. A final. Brutal line of text appeared in the center. Match confirmed. The same camera used for the pre-wedding shoot was used to create the fake evidence. A glass shattered somewhere in the room. I looked at the head table. Bennett was no longer looking at the screen. He was staring at his new wife. His face was a sheet of white ice. His mouth was slightly open. He was not angry. He was not sad. He was, I realized, in shock. He was a man who had just seen a ghost. Isabel was frozen. Her hand, the one that wasn't holding Bennett's, was clamped over her stomach. No longer a performance of emotion, but a white-knuckled, visceral grip of pure animal terror. Her bright, PR-perfect smile was gone, replaced by the slack-jawed, wide-eyed mask of the guilty. My mother was half standing. One hand was on the table, gripping the edge, her knuckles gleaming. Her face was a storm of disbelief and rage. My father found me. His eyes locked onto mine from across the ballroom, through the darkness, past the horrified faces. His face was not pale. It was a deep, apoplectic purple. He stood up, shoving his chair back so hard it screeched on the parquet floor, the sound ripping through the silence. "Rowan!" His voice, amplified by the MC's still live microphone, boomed like a cannon shot. It was a roar of pure command and fury. "Stop this! Security! Someone stop this now!" I stepped out from the shadow of the AV booth, the dim blue light of the screens, which were now holding on the metadata match, caught my face. My voice, when I spoke, was not a roar. It was calm. It was level. And the microphone, tragically for him, picked it up with perfect clarity. "I'm not doing anything, Father," I said. My tone was conversational, as if explaining a balance sheet. "I'm just replaying the facts. This is my report." As if cued by my words, the screen cut to its final slide, the deep blue and gold, unimpeachable logo of my firm. Halbert and Knox, Capital Office of the General Counsel. Notice of Internal Investigation. And beneath it, the subject line. Subject, corporate espionage, wire fraud, and market manipulation entities under review. Kestrel Maritime, the Calder Harbor Light Fund. The MC, his face a mask of sweaty panic, finally scrambled to the lectern. He fumbled for the AV remote, his hands shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. A technical difficulty. Please, just..." He mashed the forward button. He hit back. He hit stop. Nothing. The macro was gone. My laptop had full, hardwired control. He couldn't go back to the slideshow. He couldn't make it stop. "It's too late," I said, my voice still quiet, still amplified. The final lines of text appeared on the screen, a clean white epilogue beneath the H&K logo. This presentation and all supporting evidence have been simultaneously delivered to Marcia Trent at ACACAP, Com, H&K General Counsel, and the Brackenport Gazette, City Desk. Timestamp 21:35:01. Est. Send complete. The screens cut to black, the house lights, cued by the end of the file, snapped on, flooding the room with a harsh, unflattering, fluorescent brightness. 200 guests were blinking, staring, frozen. The silence that followed was louder than any music, heavier than any stone. It was absolute. The sudden, harsh light of the chandeliers felt like an interrogation lamp. The room, which moments before had been a warm, blue-hued dream, was now a bright, sterile box filled with 200 frozen faces. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down, absolute and terrifying. Isabel was the first to find her voice. It was a terrible sound, high and shredding, the practiced, charming trill torn away to reveal the raw panic beneath. "That's a lie. That's fake. All of it," she shrieked, her hand still clamped to her stomach. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her eyes wild. "She faked it. She's a hacker. She faked those logs. She did this. She's insane." She looked around, desperate for an ally. Bennett, it's not true. She's trying to ruin us. She's lying." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The MC's microphone on the lectern was still hot. I turned to the AV booth, where Mark, the tech, was staring at his equipment as if it had just burst into flames. "Mark," I said, and my calm voice cut through her shriek like a scalpel. The entire room turned to me. "Mark, would you please confirm for the guests what you and I discussed before the event?" Mark looked like a deer in headlights. All eyes were on him. "Mark," I repeated, gently, "just the facts. Did I, or did I not, provide my own laptop, which you, an hour ago, personally plugged into the HDMI 2 port on the main system switcher?" He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. Yes, you said it was a sponsor reel." "Thank you." "Mark," I said. "And the signal. That signal was a direct feed from my machine, correct? Not a file you played? It was a live output?" "Yes, HDMI 2. It was a live feed," he whispered, his professional integrity overriding his fear. "So it couldn't be faked," I said, my voice hardening, projecting across the room. "It wasn't a file. It was a presentation, my presentation, from my laptop." "This is an outrage," a man in a pinstripe suit bellowed. He shot up from table 2, the Kestrel Maritime Executive Table. It was Alan Devereaux, Kestrel's general counsel. "This is slander. This is a private event. Hotel management," he roared, turning to the ballroom doors. "Shut this down. Shut these screens off. You will be hearing from our firm on Monday. This is a gross breach of—" A woman in a sharp black suit, the hotel's night manager, had already materialized at his side. She was calm. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "the guest who just spoke, Ms. Rowan Calder, is also a registered guest of this hotel. What she displayed was from her own equipment, plugged into our system by her request. We cannot interfere." "This is a private wedding," Devereaux sputtered. "Sir," the manager replied, her voice dropping, "what you and your party just witnessed may constitute evidence in a civil or perhaps criminal matter. As of this moment, our hotel and its staff will not be party to destroying that evidence. We will not be touching the equipment. Security, please stand by the AV booth." Devereaux's face went from purple to gray. He was a lawyer. He understood. He had just been checkmated by a hotel manager. He sat down, slowly. The room's focus, now that the corporate threat had been neutralized, snapped back to where it belonged. The head table, the family. Bennett had not moved. He hadn't looked at me. He hadn't looked at his father or mother. He was still staring at Isabel, his new wife. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold, pale shock. He spoke. His voice was not a shout, it was a whisper, but in the dead, amplified silence. It carried to every corner of the room. Isabel. She turned to him, her face collapsing, the fake anger vanishing, replaced by a desperate, pleading terror. Bennett, baby, please, you can't believe her. Why? Bennett asked, his voice dead. Did you borrow Rowan's keycard? It was the question, the only question, not about the logs, not about the audio, not about the camera, about the one thing in the presentation he knew to be true. He, too, had been at that synergy meeting. He had seen her do it. Isabel's mouth opened. A little ah sound came out. No words. She had no answer. She had no PR spin. She just stared at her husband. Her silence was the confession. Rowan! My mother's voice. It was a blade. She was on her feet, her gold dress shimmering, her face a contorted mask of pure, unfiltered hatred. She wasn't looking at Isabel. She was looking at me. How could you? She hissed, stepping away from the table, toward me. You would do this? At your brother's wedding? You would shame your own family, in front of everyone? I stood my ground as she advanced. I didn't choose the stage. Mother, you did. What? You chose this, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the data I'd presented. You chose to have me disowned in a back alley whisper by the terrace doors. You chose to sit here and let my father toast to loyalty and unbreakable bonds after you conspired to frame me. You chose to let Isabel put that obscene slide on the screen, forgiving me. You built this stage. You sent out the invitations. You just didn't like the final act. You ungrateful, she stammered, raising a hand. Eleanor! My father's voice stopped her. He was on his feet now. Robert Calder, the patriarch. His face was grim, but the panic was gone. He was in command again. This was damage control. Rowan, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You have made your point. You have had your little tantrum. You have embarrassed yourself, and you have humiliated this family. But this ends, now. He reached into his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out the folded document, the one my mother had given me, the disownment paper. This, he said, holding it up, is now final. I am telling you, in front of all of these witnesses, you are no longer a Calder. You are no longer my daughter. You will get nothing. You are done. He thought this was his trump card, the final, public amputation. I simply nodded. Then, I reached into my own suit jacket. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper, not the disownment, something better. I accept that, I said, but you seem to be confused. You think you are in charge. I unfolded the paper. This, I said, is a copy of the charter of the Calder Harbor Light Fund, specifically Article 9, Section 4, the Reputational Hazard and Malfeasance Clause, the one I drafted for you 5 years ago. I held it up. It states that if any board member, which you are, father, is found to be engaged in, or knowingly complicit in, financial fraud or market manipulation, the fund's assets are immediately frozen, pending a full audit by an external, independent counsel, and all charitable disbursements are suspended, indefinitely. I let my gaze sweep the room. The H&K Notice of Investigation, which you all saw, names the Calder Harbor Light Fund. As of 9:35 p.m., when I sent that file, your entire philanthropic empire is legally paralyzed. My father stared at the paper. He knew the clause. I had written it to protect him from exactly this. The color drained from his face. He understood. I hadn't just exposed Kestrel. I had just frozen his bank accounts. The reaction from the room was immediate. A man at table 5, a banking CEO, abruptly stood up, threw his napkin on his chair, and walked out of the ballroom without a word. His wife scrambled after him. Another man, at the Kestrel table, was whispering furiously into his phone. Then, I saw the hotel manager tapping on her tablet. She looked up at the massive 10-foot-tall B&I logo behind the head table, the one underlit in gold, with a small, tasteful line at the bottom, proudly sponsored by the Vantis Corporation. She was messaging the AV team. A moment later, the golden underlighting on the Vantis logo clicked off. The sponsor had pulled their name. The entire social and financial structure of the room was collapsing in real time. All eyes were on the head table, a scene of absolute carnage. My father, speechless, holding a worthless piece of paper. My mother, staring at him, her face a mask of dawning, abject horror as she realized what I'd done. Bennett, sitting alone, staring at an empty plate, his life in ruins. And Isabel, the PR chief, trapped. Her husband wouldn't look at her. Her new family had just been financially neutered. Her corporate allies were silent. She did the only thing she could. She broke. It was not a quiet sob. It was a raw, ugly, gasping wail of pure despair. She stumbled forward, her hands clawing at her dress. She lunged for the MC's lectern, grabbing the microphone, her knuckles white. "No!" she screamed into it, the sound feeding back, a high-pitched whine that made everyone cringe. "No, it wasn't. It wasn't my idea. Not all of it." She turned, her face streaked with mascara, and pointed. Not at me. She pointed, her hand shaking, directly at my mother. She made me. She came to me. She said Rowan was a problem. She said Rowan was going to destroy the family, destroy the merger. She asked me to help. She said, we have to stop her. She promised she would protect me. She said I would be part of the family. She promised me. The room was not just silent. It was dead. The accusation hung in the air, amplified, echoing. Isabel collapsed, sobbing, at the foot of the lectern. My father's gaze, slow and terrible, moved from Isabel on the floor to his wife, the camera, the jury, and the patriarch. All were now focused on Eleanor. She was alone. The ballroom lights were a harsh, unforgiving white. They bleached all the color from the scene, turning the opulent golds and creams into the sterile palette of an operating theater. Isabel's wail had subsided into a series of gasping, broken sobs. She was a heap of white satin and ruined mascara at the foot of the lectern. Her accusation against my mother hanging in the dead, amplified air. My mother, Eleanor, was frozen. Her face was a mask of pure reptilian terror. She looked at my father, her eyes wide, begging him to fix it, to rewind the tape, to rewrite the script. My father said nothing. He was staring at the H&K logo on the black screens, his mind clearly, rapidly calculating the financial annihilation of the Harbor Light Fund. He was a man watching his empire burn to the ground. The silence was broken, not by a shout, but by a quiet, deliberate movement. Bennett, my brother, who had been sitting as still as a statue, pushed back his chair. He stood up. He did not look at his wife on the floor. He did not look at his parents. He did not look at me. He walked, his steps measured and heavy, to the lectern. He looked down at Isabel, his face completely blank, devoid of love or hatred, just empty. "The wedding," he said, his voice quiet, but clear in the stunned silence, "is over." With a slow, deliberate motion, he gripped the new, heavy platinum wedding band on his left hand. He twisted it. It was tight, but he forced it, pulling it over his knuckle. He placed the ring on the lectern, next to the microphone that had just broadcast his wife's confession. It made a small, definitive click on the polished wood. He turned and walked, not back to the head table, but toward the main ballroom exit. He didn't run, he just left. His exit was a signal. The spell was broken. As of this moment, a new voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the room. I turned. Marcia Trent, the general counsel for Halbert and Knox, was on her feet at table 4. She had been a guest. She was now in charge. "As of this moment," she repeated, her voice carrying the full weight of the firm. Halberd and Knox Capital is placing an immediate and total freeze on all transactions, partnerships, and pending agreements with Kestrel Maritime. Alan Devereaux, the Kestrel lawyer, shot up. Marcia, this is not the... Sit down, Alan, Marcia snapped, and he did. Furthermore, she continued, our systems administrators have already, in the last 10 minutes, validated the core of this presentation. The digital signature key used in the fraudulent email to Mrs. Calder has been confirmed as a forgery. The server logs and token clone data presented by Ms. Calder are accurate. She looked at me, a brief, hard nod of professional respect. All internal complaints against Ms. Rowan Calder are nullified. Her security clearance and position are, of course, fully restored. It was done. The legal and corporate execution was as swift as the social one. The room erupted, not in applause, but in movement. It was a stampede. Guests were grabbing their coats, their purses. No one was saying goodbye. They were fleeing a disaster site. The sound of 200 chairs scraping against the floor was a deafening, chaotic roar. The wedding planners, in a panic, hit the main house lights, switching off the spotlights, bringing the room to an even harsher, brighter level. The event was over. The videographer who had been capturing it all quietly powered down his camera. The lie was no longer being recorded. In the midst of the exodus, I was left, standing in the center of the room. The head table, once the stage of honor, was now an island of ruin. My parents were still there, bagged and abandoned by their guests, their world. My mother saw me. She stumbled forward, her hands outstretched. "Rowan," she whispered, her voice cracking, her face a pathetic, desperate plea. "Rowan, please, you have to understand. I just wanted to protect the family, this merger, Bennett's future. I was protecting us." "Protecting us?" I said. My voice was devoid of all heat. It was just an inquiry. "You tried to destroy my life. You tried to have me disowned. You didn't do it to protect the family. Mother, you did it to protect the brand." "It's the same thing," she insisted, her eyes wild. "No," I said. "It's not." I walked past her, to my father. He was staring at the empty chair where Bennett had been sitting. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. I didn't hand it to him. I placed it on the table, on his butter plate. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "More of your... proof?" "That," I said, "is a formal courtesy copy. It's my sworn affidavit, the one I sent to the SEC. It details the Kestrel fraud and the Harbor Light Fund's complicity. It also includes the interview and deposition schedule. The first one is yours, Tuesday, 9 a.m. His head snapped up. His eyes were bloodshot. You went to the SEC?" "I'm a risk analyst," I said. "I reported a crime. You are a material witness and a subject of the investigation." I then looked at the disownment paper he was still clutching in his left hand. "As for this," I said, "it's redundant. Consider this my formal resignation from the Calder Harbor Light Fund Board. Effective immediately. I am severing all financial and legal ties. You don't have to disown me. Father, I'm disowning you." I turned to leave. "Rowan?" It was Bennett. He hadn't left after all. He was standing by the main exit, waiting. The flow of fleeing guests parted around him. I walked toward him. His face was pale, his eyes red. "Ro," he started, his voice thick. I saw the emails. She showed me the fake one. I believed it. I believed them." He looked down. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For her. For them. I'm so sorry." I looked at my brother, the golden boy, the light. He was just a man, weak and blind, who had been fed a lie because it was easier than the truth. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I just felt empty. I nodded, once, a sharp, final acknowledgement of his words. But I did not hug him. I did not offer a word of comfort. I did not say, "It's okay." It wasn't. I walked past him, toward the exit. I paused at the door and looked back. The ballroom was nearly empty. Alan Devereaux, the Kestrel lawyer, was yanking a hysterical, sobbing Isabel to her feet. He wasn't being gentle. He was a man handling a toxic asset. He half-dragged her, not toward the grand entrance, but toward a side exit, a red-lit, staff-only door. She was no longer a bride. She was a defendant. The heavy door swung shut behind them, its click echoing in the vast, empty, brightly lit room. It was the final sound. The end. I didn't follow Bennett. I didn't look back at the carnage of the head table. I turned and walked, not to the main exit where the guests were fleeing, but to the terrace doors. I stepped out into the alcove, pushing past the curtain of white orchids. They were already starting to wilt under the heat of the ballroom, their edges browning. This was the spot, the place they had designated for my execution, just a few hours ago. It felt like a different century. The night air of Brackenport hit me like a physical thing. It was cold, sharp, and carried the metallic, briny smell of the harbor. The air inside had been thick with perfume, champagne, and panic. This was clean. This was oxygen. I walked to the stone balustrade and leaned against it. Below me, the city was a vast, glittering grid. The headlights of the cars on the bridges, the static white lights of the office towers, the red glow of the port signals. It wasn't a city. It was a data matrix, a living, breathing system of inputs and outputs, causes and effects, a place of pure, cold logic, my world. My phone, silent in my pocket all night, suddenly felt heavy. I pulled it out. Do Not Disturb had been on. I swiped it off. The screen lit up, and the vibrations began. A furious cascade of delayed information. The lock screen was a flurry of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, panicked texts from distant family, and social media alerts. Noise. But then, I saw the signal. 2 notifications, clean and precise, at the top of the stack. The first was an email from Marcia Trent, General Counsel, Halberd and Knox. Subject: Your status. Sent. 9:36 p.m. 1 minute after my presentation went live. The message was 3 sentences. Rowan, I have confirmed your findings. Your suspension is lifted, effective immediately. Your full credentials and access have been restored. Welcome back. It wasn't a victory. It was a correction. A line item on a balance sheet being moved from liability back to asset. I didn't smile. I just archived it. The second notification was a push alert from the Brackenport Gazette's breaking news app. Sent, 9:40 p.m. SEC to open formal investigation into Kestrel Maritime, Calder Harbor Light Fund over fraud allegations cited by H&K analyst. They published it. They published it all. The firewall was breached. The narrative was no longer mine, or my mother's. It belonged to the public record. The glass door slid open behind me. The sound was hesitant, grating. Rowan. It was my father's voice. It was not the roar of the patriarch from the ballroom. It was not the condescending, paternal tone from his study. It was a voice I had never heard before. Small, thin, broken. I didn't turn around. I kept my back to him, watching the data matrix of the city. He walked slowly, his expensive dress shoes scraping on the stone, until he was standing beside me. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out at the city that had, until an hour ago, been his kingdom. The fund, he whispered. It was a statement, not to me, but to the wind. My entire life's work. Frozen. The SEC. He was holding the affidavit I had left on his plate. His hand was shaking so badly the paper rattled. Bennett's gone. He just left. Your mother. He choked on the word. The bank's CEO didn't even say goodbye. He just walked out. He finally turned to me. His face, in the cold, unforgiving city light, was not the face of a titan. It was just the face of an old, frightened man. Rowan, I didn't know. I didn't know what they... He struggled, the words failing him. I'm. Don't, I said. My voice was flat. It was not angry. It was not sad. It was a command, and it stopped him cold. I turned my head and looked at him. Don't say you're sorry. You aren't. You're not sorry you did it. You're just sorry I had proof. You're sorry I had a backup. I was protecting the family, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I was protecting your brother. This merger. It was for him. No, I said. The word was a simple, hard fact. You were protecting a narrative, a story you and Mother wrote about the perfect Calders, the perfect fund, the perfect son, the perfect alliance. I was just the data point that didn't fit. You didn't try to understand the data. You just tried to delete it. I looked him in the eye. I don't belong in that story. Father, you were right. You and Mom. You wrote me out. But you forgot that I get to write my own. The glass door slid open again, this time violently. You! My mother. She stumbled out onto the balcony. Her gold dress twisted, her hair was coming undone, and her face was a ruin of smeared makeup and pure, unadulterated rage. You did this, she spat, her voice a low hiss. You did this to us, to your father, after everything we gave you. You animal! I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I simply reached up to the lapel of my charcoal gray suit. There was a small, enamel pin I'd been forced to wear. The Calder family crest, a stylized lighthouse, the harbor light, over a blue wave. It was given to me when I was 21, a symbol of belonging. I unclipped it. The metal was cold in my glove. I walked past my father, who was staring at his wife in horror. I walked right up to my mother. She flinched, as if I might strike her. I took her hand. It was limp, cold. I placed the small, meaningless pin into her palm and curled her fingers around it. It's just a brand. Mother, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And the valuation just hit 0. I left them there, on the cold balcony, holding the wreckage of their story. I walked back through the ballroom. It was a wasteland. The lights were painfully, offensively bright. The cleaning staff had already begun to move through, but the evidence of the catastrophe was everywhere. Abandoned programs, overturned glasses, half-eaten plates of $200 a plate sea bass, congealing. The 7-tiered cake stood untouched, a white monument to a lie. The 2 massive LED screens, the weapons of the war, had reverted to their default screensaver. It was a high-definition, looping image from the wedding. Bennett and Isabel, hands joined, smiling, cutting the cake, a perfect moment, frozen in time, now playing to an empty room, a ghost of a narrative. I walked through the grand lobby. The string quartet's cellos were packed in their black, coffin-like cases. The staff was clearing the guest book. I didn't walk. I didn't run. I just exited. I pushed through the massive, revolving glass door. The glass spun around me, a brief, silent cocoon, and then deposited me onto the curb. The door hissed shut behind me. The story was over. I stood on the sidewalk, in the cold, clean air. I didn't look back at the hotel. I had said nothing at the end. I didn't need to. The data was clean. The logs were immutable. The audio was time-stamped. The evidence had spoken for me. I could hear the faint sound of water from the harbor, 2 blocks away. A slow, steady shh. The sound of the waves hitting the new embankment, the one Kestrel had built. It was a rhythm. Steady, clean, unbiased, like a server. Processing transactions, like the truth. It just is. I raised my hand, not for a family, but for a cab. It pulled over. I got in, the door closing with a solid, definitive thud. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. I looked out the window, at the lights of the city, my city. "Just drive," I said. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel. liking this video, and if you really want to support this story, hit that hype button so more people can hear it.